you've probably already found dozens and dozens of Barbarian builds, which promise to be extremely fun and powerful in the endgame of Diablo 4. Unfortunately though, most of them are extremely boring, as you're just mindlessly spinning around on the battlefield. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I've got some great news, because this is probably the most fun Barbarian build out there, which hits like a truck. You can one-shot elites with it, sometimes even bosses, simply death blow, insta-kill all the enemies around you. It does an amazing job at high difficulties. I'm currently level 90, fighting plus 100 mobs. So in this video, I'm going to share everything you need to know about it, from the talent tree, abilities, do an in-depth dive on the Paragon board to show you all the upgrades you're going to need to basically have the most fun Barbarian build for the endgame. So without further ado, let's get right to it. Alright, so here we are in Kit Bardu. I quickly want to say that this is a level 90 plus build. You can also work on it starting with level 70. We're going to talk about that with the Paragon board. But if you specifically want to focus on level builds, I've got a couple ones in the top right of the screen. This one, though, heavily focuses on the end game, where you'll be able to easily tackle high level enemies with plus 10 level difference. Alright, so first off, our skill tree. This one has become extremely simple in comparison with my previous builds. While it is very important to follow everything step by step, as some abilities don't require rank upgrades to maximize the output of the build. The first ability is Lunging Strike. This is a very situational ability, as we're only using it against, for example, bosses to build up a little bit of fury, and also proc Berserk to constantly have increased damage output. So don't put any extra ranks in it. It's not necessary. This is not where the damage comes from. Enhanced Lunging Strike to heal yourself a little bit, while also Combat Lunging Strike. So every time when we critical strike with a basic attack, we will get Berserk. Then for our core skill, Rend, also on one single rank, because Rend is there to apply bleed, so we can deal increased damage against bleeding enemies. Also apply vulnerability. The upgrade for this one extends our vulnerability on targets, which we apply with different ways. And the final one also gives us some fury back if we hit multiple enemies. If we move on to our defensive skills, this is where we take Iron Skin. Iron Skin is amazing to become a lot tankier, and with a recent patch or update, this has become even more powerful. It gives you a barrier, become extremely tanky on the battlefield, also guarantee you base life, fortify, double the amount when, of course, you cast it below 50% HP. But there are some aspects which basically give you plus 50% increased damage if you have a barrier active. And this one only has 12 seconds cooldown, so it's going to be very powerful for this build. So Enhanced Iron Skin, also Strategic Iron Skin. Then, for our Brawl skill abilities, this is where the build once again becomes a lot of fun. We've got our charge right here on 5 ranks, enhanced charge, so we can stun enemies against walls, and also apply vulnerability to our targets. So if you instantly want to apply vulnerability to, say, a boss, you just use your charge, get towards them, apply your Rend for even more damage modifiers, and then bam, death blow, one shot the target. Then for our leap, I like to go with a very high rank on this, as we can basically spam it 24/7 with a little bit of cooldown reduction. The higher the rank, as you can see, the lower the cooldown. So right now we only have 10 seconds cooldown. The enhanced leap will give you reduced cooldown if you don't hit any enemies. So it can be used to traverse terrain, jump over walls. I think it's very fun to do. And also the power leap. If you at least damage one enemy, you generate 40 fury. We also want to focus on aggressive resistance right here. Gain 9% damage reduction while berserking. We're basically berserking all the time. You can also gain berserk when you hit enemies with a brawl ability. Moving on to the weapon mastery skills, this is where the build starts to one-shot elites and even bosses. It's super satisfying damage, literally millions and millions of crits. But the first thing you want to put right here is Hamstring. Just one rank, so you can slow your enemies with bleeds. So if you're applying Rend to a big pack of mobs, they will all be slowed. Deal 9% increased damage to close enemies and also gain 6% reduced from distance. No Mercy, increased critical strike chance against immobilized, stunned or slowed enemies. So we're basically stunning enemies against the wall with a charge. We're slowing enemies with this Hamstring ability, with also other abilities, but that basically increases the damage even more. And with Exposed Vulnerability, dealing direct damage with a weapon mastery skill, so our Death Blow, our next core skill, will make enemies vulnerable. So 2 seconds, as you already, when hitting an enemy with a core skill, extend the duration by another 2 seconds, you will basically have a 4-second vulnerability, which is plenty to take down your target. Then, the Death Blow itself. As you can see, only 12 seconds cooldown, almost 13, but that also because of course, the high rank. Without any points put in there, I already have 8 ranks in it, which make it already deal a lot of damage. While right now, we can crank up the damage to 40k with 12 ranks. Enhanced Death Blow will increase the damage by 100% against bosses, and the final rank, if Death Blow damages at least one enemy, you will also gain Berserk. So another way of applying Berserk. While you do want to have the Tempered Fury to increase your maximum Fury, not a very important one, but you want to go to Invigorating, so you can heal yourself every 100 Fury you spend. For 9% of HP, this gives you a lot of extra survivability. Speaking of which, you can also go for Imposing Presence right here, gain 15% additional life, forgot to talk about this, and even have bonus damage reduction against elites if you need it. Well, I don't think it's necessary, but Invigorating Fury, definitely interesting for added survivability. And also the heavy-handed. While using two-handed weapons, you deal 30% increased critical strike damage. So we're gonna hit like a truck with two-handers, do this all the time. I'm gonna talk about the weapon mastery in a second, but as key passive, you wanna go with Unconstrained. This is an amazing key passive, while with a Paragon board, we're gonna pimp our Berserk even further. Man, the damage is gonna be out of this world. Next up, we have our Paragon board. And once again, it's going to be very important to make certain decisions before other ones to make this build work like a charm. So I'm going to put timestamps per Paragon board, which one you want to focus on first and which ones are going to be best for later. So on my first board, I have a Glyph socket with Cleaver. For every 5 strength, we increase our damage with axes. And with this build, we only use our two-handed axe. Specifically, axes are going to make this build fantastic. So while wielding an axe, we also deal 12% increased critical strike damage. So you want to prioritize purchasing every single strength node in this radius. Now we have plus 71% increased damage with axes, and since we're using these all the time, this dramatically boosts our damage output. You also want to focus on the rare node Brawl right here, increase physical damage, also take all the blue nodes on this side, the raw power. You can also go with the iron strength if you want to have some extra armor, increased damage with axes as well, of course, if you meet the requirements. Moving on to the secondary board, has to be the one with the legendary node Decimator. You don't want to focus on the legendary node itself. Instead, you want to turn it around, so you will have instant access to this Glyph socket, and you want to put the Might socket in there to have bonus to all the magic nodes in the area and also increased damage while wielding two-handed weapons. This is one of the best boards out there with amazing magic nodes. So right here we've got damage reduction from vulnerable enemies. We're making these vulnerable all the time, and of course also increase the damage against them. Plus 20% increased vulnerable damage, plus 11 right here. And that's all because of this Might node. And a nice thing about it is you don't have to focus on purchasing dex or strength nodes in the area, so you can just purchase the most important ones and then move on to the next board. I do recommend you though to also focus on the destroyer node right here, plus increased damage with two-handed slashing weapons, more vulnerability damage. Right here we've got Brawl, more physical damage, more maximum life, and on the left side we also have Pillage. If you follow this exact path, you will get the most out of this specific board. So the next board I recommend you to focus on is this one right here with a Glyph socket Bloodfeeder. For every 5 dex purchased within range, you will deal increased damage to bleeding targets. Increased critical strike chance against bleeding enemies. So you will have a higher chance to instantly crit them to their graves, which is amazing. You're gonna need some dex for that. It gives us extra damage while berserking, extra strength, more damage while berserking. We also have damage reduction from close enemies. I still need a little bit of willpower for this, but the rest of the board right here, damage with berserking, increased damage against elites. These are probably the most important ones to focus on. Another one right here for which we still need a little bit more So these are the 3 glyphs and glyph sockets which I currently use. We don't need another one. On level 91, this is the most efficient way how you can distribute all the node levels basically. Once again, you can screenshot this screen. Let's go on to the second one to screenshot it. And that is the first one. But once you level up a little bit more, get some extra Paragon points, I think it's also nice to take this board right here with the legendary node Weapons Master. Once again, we don't need the legendary node. The power comes from this node right here, which is very close to the board attachment area. So we only have to work a little bit up right here to get this 20% bonus physical damage. Same counts for this board right here. So this is the legendary node Flawless Technique. This board is also something which you can focus on with your final access Paragon points, let's say, but it gives you some nice stats on the way, physical damage and also critical strike damage. I need just a little bit more dex to unlock another 15% bonus critical strike damage, but you can tell that we're getting the most out of all these points by just attaching an extra board, quickly working our way to that 20 bonus damage. First, focus on all the rest and of course get the most points out of the glyph sockets. You want to take all the strength nodes right here, then take all the dex in this area. But this is basically what my Paragon board currently looks like, and I've spent hundreds of thousands of coins to basically maximize the efficiency of all these points. Towards level 100 it might look a little bit different, but I can guarantee you this will make you hit like a truck. Since we're using two-handed axes all the time, you will already have the first bonus. When using a two-handed axe, your damage to vulnerable enemies will be increased, while the increased critical strike chance against vulnerable enemies can be boosted if you take this expertise. While if you're using axes all the time, I think it's going to be nice to use the two-handed mace expertise to get the highest damage output, as this one increases your critical strike damage against both vulnerable and stunned enemies. With this charge, you will apply vulnerability to enemies and also stun them for 3 seconds against walls. With Rend, we can apply vulnerability after we've used our death blow. So this is the one you want to focus on to maximize your damage output. Now for the gear, the weapons, the armor, the aspects, the attributes, basically everything you need to focus on. I'm going to add timestamps once again so you can follow every step one by one. So for the helmet, you want to focus on life on kill, ranks of death blow, cooldown reduction, and I currently have basic attack speed right here as well, which is not very important as I already talked about that in the talents. But life on kill is going to be amazing for added survivability. With this build, with other aspects which we're going to cover in a second, you don't even have to hit enemies to take them down. You will just passively heal yourself, add up to the survivability, plus cooldown reduction, so you can basically keep spamming your leap on the battlefield. Will also quicker reset your death blow if you fail to kill enemies with it. But this is also why you want to take the imprint. Your weapon mastery skills have an additional charge. If you fail to hit them with one shot, you can take a second blow, and most of the times if you're using it in a big pack of mobs, you will kill at least one of them. If you don't, you still have a secondary charge. Next up are chest armor, plus damage with two-handed slashing weapons. Barrier generation, something you can replace with something else to increase physical damage, or plus armor or plus damage reduction, let's say. We also have plus total armor maximum roll, a very nice roll of physical damage. So all these stats will basically increase your survivability and damage output. Focus on these attributes, while the imprint, Iron Skin, grants unstoppable. And also damage reduction is gonna be amazing if you want to have added survivability. Also eliminate all the crowd control which you have on your character. Alternatively, if you don't find this imprint, you could also go with damaging an elite grants you a barrier. It only happens every 30 seconds, so I think it's less interesting. On the gloves, I have a plus attack speed roll. I specifically took this one because otherwise the build feels a little bit slow. You're just hitting like that. It's slow motion, but if you just add a little bit of attack speed, everything is gonna be so much faster. And I don't know, the butchering process, it's very, very satisfying. Also, critical strike chance, increased strength, restore primary resource with lucky hit is a bad roll. You could definitely replace this with other damage dealing abilities. Probably the most important thing of our gloves is the imprint. Gain thorns while berserking. You're always berserking with this build, so you always have thorns. This works very well with our helmet because of the life on kill. Trust me, you can just stand right there. Enemies will hit you, especially in Helltides. They are pretty low level. They will instantly die, you will heal up, it's super satisfying. We have a weapon aspect which will make this even more powerful, which we're going to talk about in a second. But for the leg guards right here, you want to focus on more HP, maximum life, damage reduction, more armor, and I also have extra ranks of leap right here. We also have the imprint leap creates an earthquake. This makes us even tankier, but also deals a lot of damage to our enemies. With another weapon imprint, it's gonna hit like a truck, but 15% increased damage reduction on high level difficulty, I think is amazing to have for added survivability. For the boots, we have Becoming Injured, while Crowd Control grants you Unstoppable for 4 seconds. With a 20-second cooldown, this is amazing if you get frozen or crowd controlled and have not a lot of HP left. Tweak this one a little bit, while the primary attribute you want to focus on right here is the extra evade charges. I think it's amazing to have more evade charges so you can literally dance on the battlefield. On the necklace, I have +3 ranks of all my weapon mastery skill, as well as the +3 ranks on the heavy-handed passive. So that's this one right here. While using two-handed weapons, you deal increased critical strike damage. Without the ranks, it's only 15%, while right now it's 30%. So you can tell that it's a very nice bonus to have. On the necklace, we also have an amazing imprint. Very important to put it on your necklace for added bonus. It's going to be 50% more powerful if you put it on a necklace. Gain armor for 4 seconds if you deal any form of damage. And this is where the build becomes super interesting, because not only when we deal damage we get bonus armor, but also because of the thorns we get extra armor stack. So if enemies collide with us, if they attack us, our armor will stack up. So this is gonna make you become tankier even easier. For rings, your ideal situation would be plus critical strike chance, plus critical strike damage, plus damage to close enemies, and plus damage to vulnerable enemies. Alternatively, with the damage versus close or vulnerable, you could add bonus maximum HP. For added survivability, make endgame tanky a little bit better, while the first imprint we have right here is reduce the cooldown of your leap by an X amount of seconds per enemy hit, up to a maximum of 9. As you can see, my current leap has a 10 seconds cooldown. If we get a little bit more cooldown reduction or rank up our leap a little bit more, this instantly eliminates the cooldown of our leap. So you can basically keep leaping on the battlefield, constantly build up that fury, because if we hit enemies with leap, we get 40 fury, but of course also get all these earthquakes on the battlefield, and if we stand in those, we have plus 15% damage reduction. So a very nice imprint right here. The second band also crit chance, crit damage, close, vulnerable, or maximum HP. And this one, enemy damage by kick or charge will explode if they're killed within 2 seconds. So basically, if you're ramming into a big pack of enemies, they all have this modifier applied. If you then execute them with death blow, they will basically explode. The entire pack will explode. So this is gonna be super satisfying damage. Wow, we're almost there, ladies and gentlemen. Let's continue with the weapons. Once again, very important. So we don't really use our mace, but this one has some pretty interesting roles. Critical strike damage, damage to crowd controlled and slowed enemies, and also increased damage to vulnerable enemies. We also have an imprint on this one. After spending 100 fury, your next weapon mastery skill will deal almost plus 200% increased damage. On your one-handed weapons, you want to focus on 2 swords, because both swords will have increased critical strike damage. If you have something else, it's going to be less powerful for this build. So the primary attribute plus critical strike damage is going to be amazing, while Thorns damage dealt also has a 40% chance to deal damage to all the enemies around me. So this is where the nice synergy with the gloves comes in. And this, of course, with the helmet, will passively heal us because of the life on kill. And it also makes life a little bit easier, so we don't have to clear all the trash that attacks us from the back. Second sword, also damage to close, strength, critical strike damage. Instead of the stunt, I'd like to have vulnerability or crowd control enemy bonus right here. But again, the first attribute is critical strike damage. Now, for the weapon we use all the time to maximize the damage of this build, your slicing weapon, specifically the axe, as of course we also talked about during the Paragon and expertise. But I didn't find an upgrade since a long time. I mean, this one requires level 82. If it was around level 90, boy oh boy, I dealt so much more damage. And the imprint deal increased damage when you have a barrier active. So since we're using our iron skin, we apply a barrier to ourselves. This barrier, because of our chest, will also make us unstoppable, give us more damage reduction, but it also makes us 50% more powerful. So this is where, of course, all the damage modifiers come together and just make this build hit like a truck. It's super satisfying once again. And wow, I feel like my voice is fading. But this is what you want to focus on. But last but not least, we also have our gems, right? For our armor, you've probably already seen that I'm using rubies. These increase our maximum life. It's very important to already have increased maximum life on your armor, because otherwise this is going to be less efficient. Over 10,000 HP is going to work like a charm in the end game. Armor is also important, so make sure to focus on all that. So that is where we have our skulls on our jewelry. They give plus 250 armor on each slot. Then for the weapon gems, I had a pretty big dilemma. I always went with the plus damage versus crowd control. More critical strike damage when we slow or crowd control enemies with, for example, our Rend. But this is a basic damage modifier. Damage versus close, damage versus crowd control, damage versus stunt, while vulnerability damage is something that gets applied afterwards. So the green gems are definitely the ones you want to focus on to maximize your damage output. Whew, that is basically it, ladies and gentlemen. The expertise, the character with all the abilities, affixes, special imprints you want to focus on, the skill tree with, of course, also the Paragon board to maximize your damage. Have probably the most fun Barbarian build in the game. Literally one-shot your enemies, hit them like a truck. I still see so many people use whirlwind builds, and I'm like, how can you still play with this? Started leveling and went from 1 to 50 by just holding your right mouse button and then spamming your shouts. It's not fun. I'm definitely going to use it for season 1 as well. But ladies and gentlemen, that is it for the build. Let me know in the comments what you think about it. Leave a like if you find this information helpful. Right now, though, it is 4 AM out, so very welcome on the Discord if you want to continue the discussion. And of course, stay tuned for more, because I'm definitely going to update this build, talk about a lot more things Diablo 4. Ladies and gentlemen, big thanks for watching. Have an awesome day. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.